Hello, I'm Stephen Schnall, and welcome to a co-production of SOPAC and SouthNEXT Connected Conversations. Today, we'll be talking about social justice and speaking the truth, the comedian as the authentic truth sayer. Now, very excited. This is the second of a series of conversations we're having as a co-production between SOPAC and SouthNEXT. And I'm going to begin by introducing our moderator for today. That is Audrey Rowe. Audrey is from the Show Me State and takes that admonition quite seriously. She received a Bachelor of Medical Science from the University of Missouri, a Master's of Arts in Speech Pathology and Audiology from Kent State University, and studied Business and Marketing at Duke University of Houston and NYU, which all led to a 17-year career with telecommunications giant AT&T. After leaving corporate America, she started her own cosmetics business and also accepted a position as program director for the South Orange Maplewood Community Coalition on Race, a grassroots 501c3 organization in northern New Jersey that focuses on achieving true racial integration for the suburban communities of South Orange and Maplewood. Audrey is actively involved in the community, working to achieve racial equity for all students in the schools, to broaden racial representation in local government and community groups, and to foster honest dialogue and relationships between neighbors of all races. She's most happy when dancing with reckless abandon to soul and R&B, or curled up with a book on personal growth and development. Audrey has assumed leadership on local boards, including the South Orange Maplewood Adult School and elder at the Prospect Presbyterian Church. She lives in Maplewood, New Jersey with her husband, Abdul Ali Mubarak Rowe, and has two daughters, Solana Rowe, SZA, who lives in LA, and Panya Rowe, who lives in Plano, Texas with their granddaughter, Savannah Rowe. Audrey, turn it to you.
Thank you, Steve. You shared more than people could ever really want to know about me, but I appreciate that. I'm excited. I'm excited to be with this group of professionals this afternoon to talk about a very serious topic. And now I'm going to introduce you to the guests that we have with us tonight in no particular order. First, I'm going to start with Justin Williams. Justin is a Kansas City native who's performed at comedy festivals across the United States and Canada. He's also been featured on Comedy Central's Jokes.com, Mashable, Sirius XM Radio, Trial by Laughter on Comcast, Laughs on Fox, and other media outlets, including magazines and newspapers. In 2019, he appeared in the comic documentary Tasteless, exploring the current culture of political correctness. And he currently co-hosts the Fraudsters podcast, produced by the Last Podcast Network and Spotify. If you send Justin an email, he even offers or threatens to come to your house. Our next panelist is Mark Mayo. Mark is a comedian, an actor, and a writer. He appeared on Comedy Central, Showtime, and MTV, as well as Law and Order, SUV, and FBI's Most Wanted. Mark is also a retired NYPD detective with a fun and interesting podcast called Police Off the Cuff. Next, our only female panelist today is Kate Willett. Kate is not only a comedian, but also an actress and writer whose raunchy feminist storytelling is described as both smart and relatable. Her 15-minute storytelling premiered on network's comedy lineup in 2018, and she just made her network debut in The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Kate's appearance on Comedy Central's This Is Not Happening was on Split Sidester's list of best late night stand-up sets. She's appeared in many comedy festivals and was listed as a comic to watch at the LA Riot Festival. Currently, she is the co-host of the political comedy podcast, Reply Guys. And last but not least, we have Lou Perez. Lou was the head writer and producer of Webby award-winning We the Internet TV and is now the host of the Lou Perez podcast. He also wrote for Fox Sports at the Buzzer, produced the attendance with the Above Average Network, produced pilots for Fox Digital and MSN Games, and was a comedy producer on True TV's Impractical Jokers. Luke began doing improv and sketch comedy while an undergrad at New York University, where he was part of the comedy group, the Wicked Wicked Hammercats. And for years, he performed at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, both in New York and LA. His comedy duo, Greg and Lou, are probably best known for their sketch, Wolverine's Claws Suck, which has over 20 million views on various platforms. Lou now performs stand-up comedy around the country. Welcome, guys. Excited to be here with you today. And as we have this discussion, I'd like to set the framework of this not being a performance, but rather being a conversation. And I start by restating our topic today. The whole idea of the SouthNEXT Festival is this whole idea of contrast. Are we looking at evolution, or are we looking at revolution? Are we looking at something that's gradual, or are we looking at something that's eruptive and spontaneous? And we're looking at social justice through the lens of the pace of change and through the lens of you as professional comedians. The first question I like to ask is, when you think about social justice and you think about all that we've been through in this last year, it's a pretty serious, for some people, upsetting thing to focus on. So when you think about social justice and humor in the same thought, how do those two even interact or intersect? I'm going to ask Mark if you'd give us kind of your thoughts on that as a starter.
Me first? Do I be first?
Because you've been a bad boy.
What did you? So you wanted to know, how do we intersect social justice,
which is a very serious kind of topic.
Huh?
Yeah, humor. How do they even come together?
Audrey, your guess is as good as mine. You know, we're trying our best. You know what I'm saying? One joke at a time. That's it. You know, you throw it out there. If they laugh, you're like, all right, I can get away with this. And
you push the envelope.
And if you get a whole bunch of, because that's the thing nowadays. It's not so much, you know, like a heckle. It's more like a noise that comes out of the audience, like a collective, like that. When you say something that, especially at my age, you're 53, you know, I've been doing comedy long enough to remember that, you know, what you can say, what you can't say, and then it just constantly shifts a little bit. The doors close behind you, you know, as you keep going forward with it, doors close behind you until you're at a point where now you're just like, it's not even heckle. It's just like, oh.
Mm-hmm. So when you read that and you react to that, first of all, let me just ask, Lou, Kate, Justin, any thoughts on the original question? Then I'm going to double back to something that Mark said.
Yeah, I think I have just an initial question of, I hear social justice a lot, and I wonder, you know, where does the deviation occur between social justice and actual justice, or just justice proper? What are the goals of it, you know, and the definitions? Maybe you guys can help me with that, so I don't have to Google it.
Well, we have a working definition. This is a conversation, so we're not being academic.
Sure.
So, you know, just kind of go with your gut.
Well,
I think comedy can address unfairness in ways that is harder for policy and institutions to change, right? So like, if you take social justice, like in its most basic terms, right? It's just like, you know, somebody gets shot on camera and the people that shot them don't go to jail. Like, that's like messed up. Or like, if, you know, somebody gets treated differently based on their national origin or things like that. So comedy, you can explore that in a way. It's harder to change institutions, but comedians could change people's way of looking at an issue. Because, you know, we live in like a segmented kind of media environment now. I don't know if you've seen this. So we have actually kind of like parallel realities going on now. And the comedian can kind of at least attempt to try to bring people into the same reality. Like, so you can at least laugh at it, even if it might be painful to talk about, but anything can be funny. Like, you know, like in Newark, we had peaceful demonstrations because You know, and we actually, all the Black people had to stop the white people from trying to burn the 7-Eleven because we, you know, that 7-Eleven, we just gentrified that. We just got that. So white people don't come from the suburbs and burn down our 7-Eleven. That could be painful to talk about for some people, but that's funny, the irony of Black people stopping like the white kids from the suburbs from trying to burn something in the name of the Black people. You know what I mean?
Thank you for that, Justin. Kate, your thoughts?
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut anyone off. I have a little tiny Zoom delay here. So I think that one thing that has emerged in the past few years, especially starting with like Trump being inaugurated, or maybe even a little bit before that, is the notion that comedy is a type of activism. And while I agree with Justin that comedy can change people's minds about things sometimes, and it can give people a way of looking at something differently that's not like so explicitly confrontational sometimes, I think that as a culture we've started to way overestimate that. And especially I see, like, you know, around the election, that was a perfect example of a lot of like celebrity comedians sort of like seeing their Twitter and saying like, you know, vote as like their type of activism. But I don't know, in my experience, I actually think that comedy and activism are very different things, and both are really important to me. But like, just taking the vote example, I think that it's important to actually go like knock on doors and make phone calls, and like just telling jokes about things. The impact, I think, is limited, and to extend that to kind of like social justice, I mean, it's better if comedians have like the right opinions on stuff, and it's better if people are coming from a good place, but it's a little bit, I don't know, in my experience, it's a little bit easy for comedians to kind of kid themselves into thinking that they're maybe doing more than they are, when it's actually really important to do the work of addressing like institutional obstacles, or mobilizing people, or donating money if you can, you know?
I always get weirded out when I see, if you look at somebody's bio and it says like activist comedian or comedian activist, because I always wonder, you know, before, especially if I'm not familiar with their material, like which one of those identity markers will supersede the other one. Because I think one thing that, especially if you're taking on political subjects, or believe that you are coming at it from the right side of history, or that, you know, you do have truth on your side, it could be very easy to sort of just turn preachy, as opposed to like finding that great punchline or finding that really great story.
Well, you know, that brings up clapter, you know, because in the comedy clubs, especially if the media cycle is so quick, and if you're one of these people that wants to include social jokes all the time, and then you get your opportunity to hear clapter for the first time, I guess it must feel something as good as laughter, because these guys who do that, they really get off on it, because then they'll just do another one and another one, things that have no punchlines at all. But and I listen, I feel bad for people who you know, write this political comedy, and that's what their act is, because it changes so quick, and I'm supposed to be clever and have something witty that kind of sort of toes the line, you know, that I can get away with in many different diverse rooms. And just to double back, Audrey, what you mentioned was, if I were to do a joke and I thought it was funny and I deliver it, and in this particular room, you know, where, depending on where I am, like if I'm in Brooklyn or whatever, you know what I'm saying, right there in the middle of Williamsburg, and I get like, in my head, I think, wow, that's going to kill upstate. You know what I'm saying? I don't get rid of the joke. I'm just like,
Meter,
wow.
right?
I just got to say, I put it in my mind that that's going to kill upstate tomorrow.
That's a good point. Let me double back to something Kate said, and then I want to go back to that point of the that you hear in the audience. Kate, you said something I think is very profound, that the comedian should not overestimate their ability to be activists. So comedy, humor is necessary but not sufficient. Is that kind of what you're saying? You do that and other things too. All this other stuff has to happen as well.
Yeah, I think just to expand on that point a little bit, I kind of think that a lot of this notion that comedy was a path to changing things, I mean, kind of solidified around the Daily Show, especially when George W. Bush was president. And, Jon Stewart would have these really great owns of Fox News, and, Republicans, and his opinions were pretty clear sometimes. He did go after like both political parties, but I think that convinced a lot of liberals in particular that like making fun of something was going to change anything, and obviously like it really didn't. Like our if anything, things have moved further to the right since then. Jon Stewart, a big thing that he did was like hypocrisy owns of like, oh, the Republicans are saying that they don't want to do this, but they're actually doing the same thing. And we can see that makes very little difference. Like we can see that we still have a society where rich people are taking tons of money in tax breaks or handouts from the government, and still saying, that like people who are who don't have a lot of money, should not be able to get that. People who are, in some cases, like lining up at food banks or can't pay their rent. And, I think that it's just like, it's been, I think, really easy to, for people, particularly in the Trump era, to like kid themselves into a type of inaction. I saw what I think is possibly the dumbest headline that I've ever read, which was about a comedian. And it said, "Is this comedian responsible for the downfall of Trump?" And like, no, of course not. Like, I mean, to me, it seems pretty clear that the reason that Trump lost the election, or at least two big reasons, is, because we're in a global pandemic that he's handled really poorly. And also because people are in a terrible economic situation. And I think like one of the big things that is annoying to me about the way that people overestimate the impact of comedy is at the same time, what that's allowing them to do is like underestimate the impact of material forces on people's lives, and like what it would be to have a government that would meet people's needs. I'll stop talking.
Yes, got it. No, you make a very good point. So people have to, comedy, humor becomes kind of the catalyst, but then people have to act if you're really talking about change. I know that Mark was talking about, doing a joke or doing a bit and hearing the audience sigh or crickets, and your reaction. And it's been our experience here working in a community for social justice that change doesn't happen until people are willing to go to a place of discomfort. So that or that sigh means people are not comfortable with what you said. But what do you do then in terms of pushing the envelope?
Yeah, but Audrey too, I think you missed the other side of that, which is you're living in a bubble.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Where my point was, where that joke doesn't work in that particular section of the area, that joke is going to kill in another area. And it's not, we're not talking about the joke right now. We're just talking about how divided we are in just about everything, what we think is funny. I know people that would never watch SNL ever again. And then not even for a second. Mm-hmm. And the thing's been on for 40 years just because they've, taken it. And I don't watch that, not anymore. So, and then there's a comedy on the other end as well. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. Like today I'm talking to my son, and my son's 23 years old. And he just said by accident twice, because he was talking about Bill Burr's special. He goes, "Yeah, man, I can't believe you got away with that." And I'm like, in my head, and he wasn't making it a point. It was just like saying it real quick, like, but I caught on to it. I'm like, wow, that's funny that we're watching language this way, and we're so scared to listen to something that might not be that we agree with.
Yes.
Because we fear, like Kate said, that there's this illusion that it gives so much value, but then why wouldn't you just give it a chance, or just listen, just for the sake of, maybe it is funny. I'm not going to leave here changing my political opinion, but maybe something else is funny on the other side too, and I can enjoy it. So and Bill Burr's special, by the way, is not something that's even closely, remotely something that would be, cancel culture. as far as I think, you know what I'm saying? But the
I-
fact that it's like even edgy like that, and somebody young would make a comment, and that was his second comment of the day like that, talking about another comedy thing that he saw, which I also didn't think that was that crazy or that out there.
I feel like so much of comedy, especially political satire and that sort of thing, is supposed to be about holding up a mirror to society. And I think The Daily Show worked so well when they were pointing out hypocrisy. But I think it's really important to remember to turn that mirror around and look at yourself and also your own political leanings and that sort of thing. Because one thing that's definitely happened during the Trump administration is that he was basically treated and continues to be as sort of an existential crisis. It's sort of like he's a nuclear bomb that needs to be defeated, needs to be diffused, and that there have been instances that I've seen where comedians have taken the opportunity to make fun of quote unquote their own side, be it Democrats or progressives, and have been told, you can't do that now. Like, how can you make fun of ourselves? Like, we need all of our troops on the same side fighting this one common enemy. And I think that becomes a dangerous thing, because you can sort of fall into becoming just yet another ideologue and sort of saying, I'm going to point out when the emperor, who I don't like, has no clothes. But once my emperor gets in, they could be naked all they want. And that's I'm fine with that.
What's your approach to that expectation?
I happen to be, I guess, politically in a situation where I'm a political minority, being a small L libertarian, especially in New York. So when I make fun of my own party or my own people, it's not like we're in a position of power anyway. So I'm sort of always punching up when it comes to the major political parties. But I think more than anything, it's being willing to create, for the moment, that moment of uneasiness, even if it is for something that I agree with. And that happens a lot with jokes that are, very serious jokes, on very serious topics. If you're making someone uneasy, you don't necessarily, like, dead baby jokes and stuff like that have been around forever. You don't like dead babies, but if you're making a joke about it, it could be uncomfortable.
Okay. Justin, you want to jump in there?
Oh, I think you gotta make fun of everybody. Like, I'll switch sides too, because like, it's weird, because I have a home audience, and we all have our home audiences now. That's like with the internet. Like, if somebody doesn't like what you're saying, they're just not your audience, and you kind of have to accept that. But I always try to like push my audience a little bit. Like, it's funny, like I'm to the left, like politically, right? But it's kind of like what Lou was saying. It's just like, just because I hate Trump doesn't mean I'm gonna say Governor Cuomo is not the worst dude ever, and he needs to be out of Albany as soon as possible. So, or I'll do things. I'll make fun of my, like, if I'm in an area that's like upwardly mobile and liberal, like if I'm in Maplewood, South Orange, and Montclair, I will make fun of that audience, even though that is kind of my audience. Like, every time I tell people, I go, I love Montclair, New Jersey, because it's an interracial brunch that decided to become a city. And people from Montclair will laugh at that. That is like my home audience, and I'll poke fun at that. And it's fun to kind of turn the mirror on yourself, especially because even liberal people got tired of hearing about Trump. That's one thing people will tell you, that even the liberal rooms, for like the last like year and a half, just the mention of his name is like, okay, dude, we've heard every take. We get it. Yeah. It's horrible. There's nothing we can do about it. So I try to do that, but it's also the recognition that some people just aren't your audience. And like, I think what made the Daily Show effective, kind of what Lou was saying, is that, and even Kay was saying, I think contextually things have changed. Now people just have their own Daily Show. Like, there's something on Newsmax right now to where if you don't want to watch that, they've got a whole nother program that people can tune into. So that's the kind of thing I think you contend with now. It's like, it's almost separate realities. To where if you do a joke, and if I do a joke in a red state, people are surprised to hear that Donald Trump might not necessarily be the most ethical of presidents. I'm serious. Like, so people get like angry and shocked. Like, what are you talking? Like, as if I had like made something up,
Well, from a social justice standpoint, with the work that I do, we often tell people in the room, if you're feeling uncomfortable, great. That's a good sign. especially since we're talking about social justice and the change. But if you're gonna leave the way you came and nothing has really changed, then from our standpoint, we've not done our job. But our job is different than your job, and there's some overlap there, and that's what we're talking about tonight.
Can I add one more thing in here? Is that all right?
Please do, Kate. My job is to stay out of the way, so jump right
No,
in.
no, I love everything everyone said so far. I just wanted to kind of expand, like, a lot of what we're talking about is like the way that comedy, like the two sides, like, you know, kind of like liberal or conservative, and there's probably more kind of like liberal type comedy, but you know, there's also some conservative type comedy. But one thing that you never really see is, especially on like any kind of television, is you never see comedy that will really critique like capitalism in any way, or the way that capitalism contributes to any kind of social injustice. And, you know, if something's on, like, you know, a major network that is owned by billionaires, it's not going to go after billionaires. And it's, you know, people aren't going to be really allowed to make jokes about some of the root causes of this inequality, you know? So I think that that's another way that comedy, at least like very mainstream comedy off the internet, where you can say whatever you want pretty much, is going to be limited. And even though you can say whatever you want on the internet, like the people that are you know, people who are loudly calling to abolish the police, or people who are you know, socialists, communists, whatever, like those people are hurting their career by doing that, you know? So there's, even though there's like liberal and conservative comedy, there it's still a pretty narrow range that is very close together, that is allowable, and in my opinion, like not stuff that is like that could actually solve the problem, even if people feel uncomfortable to an extent, you know?
Got you. So you're saying like power and money has its place and its constraints that he puts around what you guys do for a living. It sounds like that's kind of an unspoken rule. You know, how do you personally decide how far is too far?
I would actually push back against that, because I think when it comes to comedy, especially of the political variety, I think the 1%, the quote unquote 1%, is often a target. I think billionaires are often a target. And it is, I mean, you can get into, you know, issues of sort of like woke capitalism, where it's sort of like, it's much easier to target, you know, this cabal of the 1%, rather than actually make changes that will, you know, affect people, you know, in a positive way. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I happen to be a big fan of the private ownership of the means of production. I do not believe in the collective ownership of the means of production, nor the social ownership of the means of production. But you know, I think those are debates that really need to be had, especially nowadays. I mean, the democratic socialism is, I mean, as far as you know, it's sort of a PR move. I mean, I think it's doing pretty great over the past few years. More people are talking about democratic socialism now than, you know, before the fall of the Berlin Wall. So, yeah.
But when you get ready to do one of your sets, I mean, how conscious are you of what Kate just stated as kind of the reality that's out there? You know, when you're actually putting together your presentation or your show or your shtick, is there something in the back of your mind that's kind of creating a boundary, or how does that manifest itself? Justin, any thought?
Oh, I can't go big. So yeah, I have my, you know, like, it's funny because I work on like political economy for like my day job and things like that. So I have like very separate things. I haven't mastered a way to make that aspect of my life funny, which is funny because it's like the things I like think about and work on and write. I don't know how to do that yet. And maybe I'll figure that out. I don't know. I think as someone that kind of like agrees with what Kate's saying, I think it's a hard thing to navigate, right? Because it's like, what, like for instance, I'm signed by a corporation that in one aspect of of my artistry, they hurt me because of capitalism. But that on the other end, precisely because maybe some of their other practices, they're able to like amplify me in a way that we sort of critique like crony capitalism as part of the show, right? So like I it's the system's so big and there's so many like ironies in it that you kind of get forced into that like I'm kind of like of a lot of different minds about it. I don't know how to deal with that as far as comedy goes.
Mark,
I can make fun of it.
The whole concept.
I can sell T-shirts.
I'm not big. I'm not unless I have something really clever politically. I'm probably not going to add it. I like the idea of like that old-fashioned, like, wow, oh wow, he just he got me. Even though I like to provoke a thought, I'm not. There's nothing in me ever that wants to change anybody's opinion about it. Don't listen to me. I'm an idiot. You know what I'm saying? But my point is, if I'm out there and it's almost like you're fighting, you're jabbing in a way, and you're dancing around with the audience. I'm going to take you for a ride, whether it's for 10 minutes, 15, 45 minutes. If I'm going to give them what I came to give them, you know what I'm saying? My jokes. I don't switch up. They're going to get it. But then again, my jokes don't come from like a bad place, an evil place. They're jokes. They're funny. They're meant to be fun. So I don't really run into that. Now, that being said, I was a police officer and I have an hour show that I used to tour with about being a cop. And I have a lot of cop jokes. Once again, they're not bad jokes. They're not really picking, they're jokes. They're funny. But am I worried that once in a while you'll get somebody that doesn't even want to hear the word police right now? They're going to turn off right. That's only happened, I think, not even a handful of times. Once last year, two women came up to me after the show and they're like, oh, when you said he was a cop, that's it, you turned us off, but then you said you was Dominican and, then I liked you again. And I'm like, in my head, that's so stupid what you're saying right now. I didn't even want to have this conversation right now. So I was like, okay. And they're like, just so it's because we're activists and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And I just walked away. I don't want to have this conversation. I don't care. I did my stuff. It's done. I don't want to know you. I don't need you as a fan. Do you know what I'm saying? But if people that come to comedy shows, I agree that there's a huge expectation. Please make me laugh. I want to have a good time. And 99% of the time, it's like that. So I can talk about being a cop. I can do my police jokes. If I have something that I wanted to say politically, I know how to get in and out of it because that's what I do. That's my profession. So the people that want to agitate or disturb an audience, that you got to go out of your way to do that, man. You know what I'm saying? You really have to try to get on their nerves.
You have to work at it.
Yeah, because they're there to laugh. Sometimes if there's a room for free, like downtown somewhere, you can get the free rooms are always a little tougher.
Let me share something with you guys that I came across when I was kind of looking at this topic. And it's a quote from one of the research work that they do about the impact of laughter on people, on society. And it says that laughter shifts perspective, allowing you to see situations in a more realistic, less threatening light. A humorous perspective creates psychological distance, which can help you avoid feeling overwhelmed and diffuse conflict. Does that resonate with how you see your role in delivering humor with your audiences? Or if not, what do you see that's different about your perspective on what you're doing and what should happen in that room?
I'm hoping somebody else goes first because I missed the first part of what you said.
Anybody want to take a shot? Justin?
Yeah, no, I think it's both. It's like I believe in that basic premise, but like Kate says, there are like limitations. It's like I don't think like, oh man, I could just crush that set. We just ended economic inequality out here tonight. I don't think that. But at the same time, the arts is the way that it's you're presenting your human self. You know what I mean? So if you're you have an experience that other people aren't exposed to, you can humanize yourself and your experience in a way that potentially could have them see other people's humanity in ways that, like kind of what Mark was talking about when they labeled him as either a cop or Dominican. Like one thing I've noticed about social media is just like the way, and this kind of goes to Kate's point, there's also capitalism, right? It's the way that it's encouraging us to essentialize ourselves and to silo off our identities, right? Like, so now everybody's got a t-shirt and a hat for their candidate, and you know, all this identity, like it's like it's the most like crude form of identity politics where people don't see the world as like complicated. And I think the arts can present complicated identities. That's why I like comics. Like comics are awesome. They're like you know, they could, you know, the basic of any premise is like your complicated identity, right? It's like I come from African immigrants, but I was raised in Nebraska, right? That's the setup. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, it does break down barriers and help you to see commonalities. I have to tell you, Mark, if you came to my door and did your hood knock, I would have let you in, man.
It worked like a charm. Like I say, man, it never not worked.
I was rocking. Let me ask you a little bit about, when we're talking about change, we're talking about new ideas or people thinking about approaching things in a new way. And the question we have that I'd like you guys to consider is, what are your thoughts on how we protect people expressing new ideas like sometimes you're doing?
Let them speak. Because
Okay.
look, right now, we're talking to a couple of college professors, and you know, this is going out to the colleges. You know, you might not agree with it, but if they're trying to get on a college campus right now, or university campus, and your idea is not a popular opinion right now, good luck. If you manage to get the date, they're going to talk through it and try to disturb it. And I just think, you know, this is the place supposedly for higher learning and to exchange ideas. And it's so far removed from that. It's so far gone from that. It's unbelievable. It's actually, it's hard to believe that happens, that, you know, voices are stifled, that we can't have just people come and watch and listen and leave with their own thoughts, without disturbing it or making sure it doesn't start, it doesn't happen. Getting rid of even faculty that may be doing a lecture or a speech somewhere else or representing a company somewhere else. It's just that differs from their opinion. And this is where, you know, this is what supposed to be the heart of it, the heart of arts.
What's our role then, Kate, in making sure that protection's there from your, you know, what do we do as people looking at this discussion today, as you doing your job and me doing mine? How do we actually protect that?
I mean, I think the debate about free speech, I think that there's a few things that are like wrong about the way that we as a society are having that conversation. One, I think a lot of the time, the debate about free speech comes down to very famous rich people talking about cancel culture and saying like, oh, you know, you can't say this or that, you know, but then the person is like literally saying it like in the New York Times. And it's like, it seems like you can say it because you just did. So, you know, I think like a lot of the debate like it feels sort of artificial because in fact, like, people are able to express the viewpoints that they say they're not allowed to express. And, you know, that I think that like, especially if something is either A, really power serving, or B, bigoted, people say that they're not allowed to express that, but actually those ideas are still like so much part of like our dominant culture that you can see people like J.K. Rowling, for example, saying, oh, you can't say this or that about trans people, but there's actually no consequence for that. I think where you do start to see people experience real consequences is people who are talking about, you know, Palestinian rights. Like then you'd see people actually getting fired for things. So I think that like a lot of the views that people say are like cancelable or whatever, you actually end up seeing people be fine and actually kind of making more money through presenting themselves as subversive when they're actually, saying what a lot of people think. And I guess, I also think that like in terms of like protecting people from, like how do we protect free speech? I don't think that people criticizing something is an infringement on free speech. I think if somebody says if somebody says something and then someone else says it sucks, like that's just still all free speech. I think where you do really see a threat to free speech is, one, from corporations, like people who work for certain corporations aren't going to be allowed to say certain stuff. And two, so I know this might get a little contentious, but the police are, in my opinion, are a very big threat to free speech. When you see people like protesting and you see cops like beating them, okay, that is a real infringement on their free speech. And it's I think a lot of the conversation about it with comedy in particular can be a little artificial. I think that for the most part it is protected, except when you're working for somebody that says that you can't say certain stuff.
I think I think it's really incumbent on all on people to know that at no time in the United States have we had stronger free speech, First Amendment protections than we do now. Especially over the past 10 to 20 years, the Supreme Court has been ruling in favor of free speech protections, and that's amazing. So I think a lot of what we're talking about when it comes to cancel culture or free speech, it comes down to more of a cultural thing. And what is
Can
it
I
that
challenge you on that though, Lou? Because
hit me up.
I mean, if we look at free speech from a legal standpoint, yes, I see what you're saying. But from the social standpoint, do you still think that things are freer in terms of what's allowable than they've been in the earlier times?
I mean, I was getting into that with the culture. I mean, for one, it's an amazing time because we all have tools to actually get our speech out there more than we ever had before.
Mm-hmm.
And I, to the point about, rich, successful people talking about, having, talking about being canceled and all that. I mean, I would think like any movement, you would want people with large platforms to be bringing those things to light. So while Mark's son can't believe that Bill Burr is saying such and such, having a figure like Bill Burr speaking, I think, is important to smaller people who are getting fired because of either something that they said or something that was misconstrued or just something that's completely outright insane. There was a case of a guy who was driving a truck and somebody was pulling up beside him and he made what looked like an OK symbol, right? And a guy in the car took a picture of that. And then this gentleman who was driving the truck ended up getting fired because at some point the OK symbol became a symbol of white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy who happened to, the driver who ended up losing his job happened to be, I think he was either Mexican American or something like that. But ultimately, he had no idea what was going on, or even if he was giving an OK sign. I think he just happened to be caught his hand in a certain shape. So things like that, are certainly happening. I hope that we're moving. We can move back to being a lot more just not necessarily not even accepting of ideas that we don't like, but being willing to be like, okay, well, I don't accept this idea, so I'm not going to try to ruin your life or take away your job, at the very least.
Yes,
if I could
I'm
just
sorry, Mark.
address what Kate said about the here it comes about the police and squelching the freedom of speech. I don't think you have to look right now. We have a blatant look into what a difference administration makes, because I don't think many people realize how much control the current administration has over how law enforcement handles riots and things of that nature up until now, because we saw a hands-off approach, not only in New York City, but across blue states all over the country. And we saw exactly what happened with the riots. And those were leaders who were saying, hands off. That's the current administration. So, you know, when you were watching the videos of police beating on people, maybe it was like, we got to stop this and we got to stop this now. Get out there, officers, and do your job. You know what I'm saying? And now you become confrontational. And what happens? People fight back, and now you're in a confrontation. So that's what you're seeing on video. Now what you're seeing on video now with current administrations, let's go right here to New York. We didn't have that many days. We were blessed that we didn't have that many days of riots, but just you could see it. People running in and out of stores in the middle of the day, looting, coming out, cops standing right there and not doing anything because they were told to stand down. So you got to be, it would be nice if people almost, you know, try to understand that. And you know, that's part of, that's kind of like a lot of what happens. You know, you create friction or you take it away. And it depends on who the mayor is, who the governor is, and who the president is.
Okay, so the tone set at the top. I get that. I get that.
You do what you're told to do.
Yeah.
And it just trickles downhill.
Anybody want to respond to that? And Justin,
Well,
I was going to go ahead.
Well, yeah, because I didn't want to like derail. Yeah, but why is it? Here's what I've noticed about this debate that I think is like so interesting. Again, it's like the siloed like approach. Like no, either the narrative has either become every city is burning, or you know, like there's no one that's committing any crimes of things. Why is like the admission of police misconduct in the cases where it is blatant? Why is that so hard for society, I think, as a whole to talk about? I don't want to make you speak for all like police, right? But I think it would make people feel more comfortable if they could at least hear it. And you've done this I know you personally, so you've done this in the past. But there's blatant things of peaceful protesters being like attacked, being funneled out of subway stations.
Justin, Mark, can I just come in and say, and yeah, I think Justin, you bring up a really good point, and I think one of the criticisms during like a lot of the unrest was you would have footage of either people looting or destroying property and cops staying away, but then you had footage of peaceful protesters being hit, and it was sort of like, whoa, hold on a second. If you have to make a choice on who you're going to aim at, I mean, aim it at the people who are who are doing this or that. But I think a big reason why there's such a divide and people really hunker down to either be Blue Lives Matter or support the police and or whatever. I mean, it has a lot to do, I think, with the narratives that the media is spinning. I mean, when you look at a chyron on CNN that says fiery but mostly peaceful, you got to be like, what are we doing here? Like that's not the kind of nuance that we're talking about.
Yeah. I think that on either side there has to be accountability.
Sure.
And that's what time, when people are taking sides, they tend to err on the side of their political position rather than holding everybody accountable on all sides, whether they're the looters, the rioters, and the police, but accountability across the board and not dismissing in the interest of change or social justice, what's really going on in front of us. Justin, you were going to make a comment. I believe the last thread we had before, and Mark, I was going to go back to you right after Kate spoke, but I didn't want to take the easy shot. So I'm glad you hopped in there about the comment about the police's role. Thank you.
We can move on to something funnier because all my comments are basically an ACLU civilian review board meeting. And I don't know how funny that's going to be.
Okay. Let me ask each of you from your own perspective, what are you not willing to give up in terms of what you speak about from your platform as comedians and as artists? Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I mean, I would like to, to continue doing my police material. And I've done, but right now, I've chosen to kind of sort of also too, because I've written a bunch of other stuff during the COVID, and most of my spots right now, if I'm trying to get up often, which is that there's not that many places to get up right now, is a 15-20 minute spot. So I'd rather do my new stuff, but I like to be able to freely do my police material without, given a chance. But I most of the time, I have a chance, and like I said, it's 99% of the time, people are going to give you, an opportunity to make them laugh, and then when you do, they trust you and they go on the ride. So I'm not that political. I just hope that when this is all said and done, that we'll be able to do it again. I talked to some comedians, and they seem to believe that it's not going to come back. And we're talking about veterans. I'm talking about 15-year, 20-year people, and they're like, nah, it's done, it's over, or at least the way we used to do it. So it's a scary time because I've been a comedian now longer than than I was a police officer. So, and it's part of something. Not only do I love doing it, but it's a business. It's the way I am. I made most of my money for years now. So it's is it going to come back? And a lot of the reasons why it might not have to do with what we're talking about right now. Are there going to be separate rooms? Are we going to continue to be so divided as a society? Whereas, prior to the COVID, I remember there was a comedy club somewhere in the world. I don't think it was in the States, but they pre-approved your material. I think it was in Europe or somewhere like that. And they were guaranteeing the audience what they were going to listen to would not offend them and stuff like that. And I remember reading that article, and how long before that gets over here, and it's not just a kids-friendly show, because I've done kids-friendly shows, not the most fun in the world to do, but now it's also like you're gonna do comedy in a safe space,
Wow. When you say it coming back, are you referring to live performances? Or are you referring specifically to comedy?
I'm talking about stand-up comedy and
stand-up comedy.
clubs. Are there going to be any left? Or I'm the eternal optimist, so I already see it happening. But then when I talk to my friends, they're like, "Nah, it's dead, bro. It's over. It's over. It's going to spin into something else." And it has. But you also think it's a temporary thing that we're doing right now. The way we're doing it, Yeah. So I don't know what you guys think.
Anybody want to jump in?
I think that, I think that way more than anything else, like what is going to threaten the ability for comedians to perform is like the fact that so many venues are closing or are going to close over the next year, while we're still in the pandemic, and like, I mean, there's a lot of other countries that are, and even other states that are giving their venues, money to stay open. But, like, I'm not a reopen before it's safe person, but at the same time, if you're going to ask a venue to keep their doors shut, like they need to, have assistance, so I'm just really hoping that there are still places to perform when the pandemic is over. So I guess, yeah, I don't know. I'm not ready to completely give up hope that, perhaps there will be, like, there's the Save Our Stages Act that, is a possibility. But yeah, it's definitely not looking good for a lot of venues here in New York and throughout the country.
Well, the first part of that question, what are you not willing to give up as you go forward, assuming there's going to be a venue and an audience for what you have to say?
Yeah, I would say, like, just like live performance in general, over the past few months, I've done it in parking lots, I've done it in parks. And like, I personally, what I'm not willing to give up is the experience of telling jokes to a live audience, in whatever way it's safe. I'm not going to, do it inside before, the pandemic is under control. But, whatever the form comedy exists in, like, to me, the experience of like live audience, like internet, just doesn't replace it. And I'm going to keep going with that in some form or another.
Okay. Let's go to Justin, then I'll come to you, Lou. What is it you absolutely will not change, will not give up in your craft, given all these other circumstances going on socially and otherwise?
I don't want to give up trying to be complicated and having complicated views based on the way I see the world and my own life experience. Because I could make it if I became uncomplicated. I tell people all the time, do you know that if I would have just, this whole, like the last 4 years, I could have joined Diamond and Silk and I could have been on stage at the Republican National Convention if I went that way, or I could become like a problematic, like a lefty Twitter person. Like that's my nightmare, is becoming the person that's driving like the insane narratives that are like all problematic in their own kind of ways. So that's one thing I don't want to give up. I always want to say something that you might like or something you might not like, but you see that it's coming from a place of honesty at least. And like, I'm not trying to let me just kind of go back briefly, like the free speech thing. Most of the people that are complaining about free speech, it's not all. Like sometimes audiences are just testy and you can't really, they just want to be offended. But a lot of times it's powerful people that are saying mean things about vulnerable groups and wanting to get away with it. And it's not, sometimes it's not even like that much of a joke. So I don't ever want to go into like, that category, you know what I mean? That's my biggest fear. That's why I don't want to give up. I'll just stop performing.
And your thought on your future, the future of, stand-up?
The future of stand-up is right now during the pandemic is on the Fraudsters podcast that airs exclusively on Spotify. If you want to learn about how the forces. No, yeah, I did a few outdoor shows, and it was good to see people and everything. And kind of like Kate's saying, it's part of my criticism of, for instance, is I think if you're the governor of New York and you have one of the largest tax bases of millionaires and billionaires, and you allow live entertainment, which is sort of synonymous with New York City as a cultural icon, you allow that entire industry to essentially collapse, and then talk about how you're specifically not going to tax millionaires. By the way, in New Jersey, by the way, that doesn't have the same entertainment infrastructure, millionaires are being taxed, right? So I think I think that's one of the things I want a place to come back to, right? It's we've watched a lot of the clubs I've started out have closed forever. And the fact that even at the most basic level, like landlords weren't paid off to even give their renters a break, like something's like really, I think, wrong with that picture.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, Lou, and your thoughts on just what has to happen for you. You're not willing to give up.
Sure. Yeah. And to piggyback that, and I'm in New York, and it is interesting sort of the productions that are allowed to move forward as if everything was normal. And that includes big productions like the VMAs, Saturday Night Live. But meanwhile, you have, struggling comedy clubs that, the owners are not millionaires. They don't have the pockets to be able to keep that up. And it's really hard to watch. It's really hard to see that. What I'm definitely not going to give up is whether it's on stage or online or in the videos that I make and that sort of thing, is taking chances and putting stuff out there and being willing to fail. I think that's really important. And also I sort of make it a point where I'm a much nicer person off screen, off stage. So I'm very approachable. So, I might come off one way in a joke, but ultimately I hope that I hope to have a connection with people that goes beyond whatever persona is put out there, whatever punchline is,
I'm the opposite. I'm nice on stage. Please don't talk to me when I'm done. I don't want to get to know you. I don't want to hear your problem. I don't care that your brother got a ticket 3 years ago from some.
Well, Mark, I got my PBA card. I want to show you.
Yeah, leave me alone, please. Leave me alone.
Yeah, well, Mark, you never thought about going maniac cop in this environment, and just going straight to the top, like being just like Sheriff David Clark up there?
You know what? No, man, that's not, like, for example, you said you're complicated. I'm complicated. My father, he was a radical in the 60s and the 70s. He was a communist, a socialist, an atheist. And, he was on the unemployment list for most of his adult life. But, he said to me on his deathbed, he really did. He goes, SouthNEXT, which is my real name. He goes, I always hated the police, but I loved you. So when people want to know, like, well, how did you become this? And I'm like, let's just look at my father, man. So people are complicated. I'm complicated. I have different, like, I think you should legalize marijuana. Not only that, but I think Oregon it might go in the right direction. Not only should they legalize all drugs, but they should give them away for free. Think about how much time you would save these people if they didn't have to look for drugs, if they didn't have to find a way to get money to get drugs. They could go back to their normal life. They got it in their pocket right here. I go back to fixing the truck. I go back to, don't drive the truck though. I go back to, but I think Oregon might be onto something. And I think we should take all our drug addicts that get convicted of crimes over here and offer them either jail, or you can move to Oregon and give them a one-way ticket. And let's see what happens. Defund the police. You want to defund the police? Listen, Minneapolis, they're on their way. Let's see what happens. Just leave it there. You know, they can't come up for air though. They can't, nobody's going to help them. You're on your own. You're on your own. You figure it out, but maybe there's a solution there. Maybe there's something that we could figure out, you know. Maybe there's not 1,000 homicides a year.
Yeah.
But you got to take a little bit more than a weekend. You got to take more than a weekend to figure that out. But a social experiment. If you're the type of person that wants to live with no police, you're for defund the police, we're going to ship you over there. One-way ticket. You can live there. You figure it out.
You may think that's hilarious, but that's actually happening. There are people by the busloads sending them off to Oregon, which talks about the speed of change. The things that we thought were far-fetched and comical yesterday are reality that we're faced with right now. Let me just full circle now, because I've just been given our 5-minute mark. Yeah. So as we talk about this topic, we talk about you and your profession and what you see is your accountability, your responsibility in this whole process of change. Let me just circle back and have you share with us, what are your parting thoughts, things you'd want people to understand about you or about your role as we leave this conversation today. Let's start with you, Lou.
Yeah, so I think one of the big things, and I'm sure my fellow comedians can agree, is, you know, we can't do what we do without an audience, and we can't do what we do without, you know, earning an income from the audience. So what I would say is, you know, if you see a comedian whose work you like, get in touch with them. I'm sure they have a Venmo or some way to, you know, to donate some money. And, you know, for the price of a latte a month, you can buy me a latte a month. And I'd really appreciate that.
Thank you, Kate.
I don't know. I mean, you know, I guess I probably have said a lot of the things that I wanted to say, but I guess, you know, I'm excited about the internet. I think that there is like a lot of really fun and original comedy that's coming out, like stuff that you can see on Twitter or even TikTok. And, you know, I guess I just think that, podcasts too. So, I mean, I would just encourage people to, like, when they're deciding, you know, if they like comedy or not, to kind of explore, like, you know, multiple outlets for that, and not just like stick with, you know, what's on SNL or something. There's a lot of great stuff out there, and a lot of the most original stuff is happening kind of on a more independent level. So check that out.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I agree with Kate. You know, there's so much new stuff out there. You know, what we've gone through with this, the COVID, is just, you know, being resourceful. And if you're a hustler, you've continued to do comedy through it all. You found a way to express yourself. And I think if you're doing that right now, you'll always do that. So I think I'll always be involved in it one way or the other. I hope that this vaccine is exactly what they promised us, that people are going to not get the corona, that we're going to have, you know, people won't be dying. I had a friend that died 2 weeks ago. Justin knew him as well. Kenny Ortega, only 51 years old. So it's definitely real. It's definitely out there. I hope this vaccine, because if the vaccine works, then we can we can start with the healing process. And if we can start with the healing process, maybe we can get back out there again. You know what I'm saying? And we can get back out there again. We'll be in comedy clubs, on stages, you know, and making people laugh, which is what we love to do.
Great, thank you. And Justin, the last word in this segment?
Please, I just want people to realize that if you don't like what I'm saying, sometimes please know that I'm joking and that I would never do anything to hurt you. And I do see your emails, by the way. And if you like it, please, if you like what I'm doing, please keep supporting me. I need that as well, because the emails of people that don't like you are, they're mean as hell. People don't realize that they're actually mean as much as they want to talk about comedians, like people on the internet are mean. But we love the internet because we're on the internet right now. So, you know, chicken and egg.
Only game in town, right? Well, I really have enjoyed the time talking with each of you. And, you know, as we go forward into this year, the next year, whatever that might bring for us, whether it be in comedy or just our day-to-day lives, I'm hoping, Mark, that you get a chance to continue to talk about the things you love, whether it be your police comedy or not, that Kate gets to do her live audience, whether it's on a parking lot or not. Justin, that you continue to be complicated in what you perform and what you present to your audience. And that, Lou, I have no doubt that you'll continue to be able to take chances in all that you do. So I thank you for your time. I hope that something we've said or discussed this afternoon might have spurred some additional way to perceive what's going on in our world as it relates to social justice in other areas. And we thank SOPAC for this opportunity. So have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for hanging out. Thanks. Nice to meet you guys too.